Vin.
I'm Zonia.
And that is Booby and Ghosty. I really like this Ghosty guy. Look at this.
Yeah, it's really cute.
I'm probably going to just have him like, maybe I'm going to have him in my shirt like this for the rest of the record. Okay. All right. So we have a Patreon partner tier where you can jump on and actually do a review with us. If you want to do that, email me at vinandsori@gmail.com. And Z is one of our, I don't want to say, you're not a foundational villager because you came in a little bit later, but you're like a cornerstone villager, I would say.
I came in, I conquered, and took over.
Yeah, you came in, you took over, and Z is kind of like you're like the oracle, in the Matrix. Everybody goes there for wisdom. I actually had a question for you a couple days. I called you up. I'm like, Z, help me with this. I said to myself, if Z doesn't have the answer, then we're screwed. So,
and I didn't.
And you didn't, so we're screwed. Anyway, Z, what song are we listening to today?
All right, this is the song Mental Demolition by the band Terror. They're a hardcore band based out of Los Angeles, originally from New York. You might hear the term New York hardcore referenced when talking about them because it's sort of a sound that originates from New York, and they fit within that vein a bit, though they have their own style and they change things up a bit. This song is from their 2018 album called Total Retaliation, and it's by far my favorite album out of their entire catalog.
So New York, so like what's the perennial New York metal band? Or New York hardcore?
New York hardcore? Oh boy, there's a whole bunch of them. The scene had a lot of early foundations with Cro-Mags and Agnostic Front, a number of other bands.
Agnostic Front, I've heard of them. I know I've heard of them because they were, that was like one of my favorite names for a band of all time.
Yeah, they're a good band. They were a favorite of mine from when I was like a preteen. So you know about metalcore music, right?
No, I don't. I'm nodding in agreement. I'm like, I don't know what metalcore music is.
So metalcore derives from metallic hardcore, which is sort of the style of music. It was very common in New York in the early 90s. Okay. And it sort of evolved out of all the late 80s hardcore bands that were going more in a metal direction, and people referred to it as metallic hardcore. And over time, that more evolved throughout the mid-90s, and eventually there was metalcore. So when you hear this band, you'll probably identify some of the earlier elements of metallic hardcore, even though they're much more modern. They're a newer band, and they have a lot of their own style, but you'll probably identify some of those elements and recognize them.
Okay, so now we're going to listen to Terror, Mental Demolition. Sounds like an uplifting song, Z. Mm-hmm.
No escape, stuck inside. Stress and pain don't leave my mind. Only fate can decide what's a clock, so we're out of time. Cold-blooded steel in this fucked up world we live in. Expect us. Sicken me, disintegrating all around me. I lie awake and think about how this whole world turned on itself. I feel I'm turning into somebody else. My condition will be the end of me. It's mental demolition. I can't break it.
I have to hug my plushie. Was that an axe in the guy's back at the end of the video?
It kind of looked like it, huh?
Yikes. Okay. What is the song about to you? I'm looking at the lyrics right now. Go for it.
All right. So the band didn't have a release in 2016 or 17. There was a 2-year gap, I believe, between albums. And it kind of, that particular song and much of that album feel like sort of a roll-up of everything that transpired between 2016 and when they released that album. And it feels like, they're fed up with the way people are turning on each other, the way people are just taking sides automatically. One of the things that you and I talked about in a fireside recently was about how you're kind of automatically assume that if you're not already on someone's side with something, then you must be on the opposite side.
Right.
And people just kind of quickly go to their corners.
Right.
And accuse you of being their enemy, or supporting the person that they despise.
Oh, Trump. If I shoot a video that Trump did X thing good, then automatically I'm a pro-Trumper.
Uh-huh.
I had somebody tell me, "You are a horrible human being. I'm disgusted with myself for supporting you." And then the comment below it was like, he is not for Trump. He is for Medicare for all. He was just saying that this one thing Trump did was good. And then there was no follow-up oh, my bad, I overreacted. It was just silence after that.
Yeah. It's just attack. And then if you're wrong, they never pay attention to it. And it's gotten that way. It's like there's no gray, there's no middle ground, there's no, I'm a little bit left and a little right. It's all, I'm all one or the other. And I think that this album kind of feels like that's a lot of what they're talking about, is that he's losing his identity. He feels like he's turning into something else. People are turning against each other. And it kind of feels like sort of the anthem of 2018, right? Or post 2016 America.
Well, I was gonna say the music, and I'm actually happy about that in the sense of when I was talking to OTEP, I told her I was a little bit disappointed with the music during the Bush era, because you could listen to a lot of records straight through and not know that there was some controversial war happening.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go back to the 60s, everybody had to have a Vietnam song.
Mm-hmm.
When we do retro shows and we review old school bands, if it's from the 60s or 70s, everybody had a Vietnam song or some sort of allusion to Vietnam. Whereas, during the Bush era, OTEP did a song that was very explicit. Warhead is the name of the song. There's on 5 fingers, I can name bands that addressed directly, at least popular ones, that addressed directly what the hell was going on in our country at the time. And so I don't like how divided we are as a country, but I do like the fact that at least it's being reflected so that, in 2,000 years from now, a space alien can say, okay, during this era, this is what was going on in this country. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, in punk and hardcore in certain genres and a lot of underground music, there's always been the attention to what's going on in the world and what's plaguing people and talking about it. But obviously in pop, that's hasn't really been a thing in previous decades, except of course, like you were mentioning, in the late 60s and early 70s. So there was like this big gap where there wasn't, in popular music at least, mainstream music, there wasn't a lot of attention paid to injustice and war and such. Underground and punk and certain genres always paid attention to it. But yeah, now it's like people have woken up. But in a way, I feel like people have woken up a little too quickly, and they don't know how to balance out their intake of this stuff. Like, I have family members who started paying attention, like family members older than me, who started paying attention to politics and detail and world events since the 2016 election. And it's like
that is the wrong time to plug in.
Yeah, and it's like they're overwhelming themselves with it. They don't know how to balance it and disconnect for a little while and recuperate. Instead, they're just all in.
Well, I saw something crazy. I don't see if I can try to find it, but I was having this back and forth discussion on a particular political topic that I'm pretty prolific in speaking about. And he's talking to somebody. So I'm in the thread, but he's talking to somebody else. And then he goes, I'm not going to bring up the subject, but he goes, fair enough. Anyone who is pro this is the enemy. So it's like, and this guy likes me.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if he's saying, I'm going to say something to him, I'm sure he's going to say, well, you're not my enemy. But like, it's that type of language now where it's like, these people are the enemy, and pro-Trump, you're the enemy. And if you're a leftist, you're the enemy. And this language, like, it's insane. I was going to ask you about this. I don't think that human beings were designed to have a 24-hour news cycle.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Right. So like one of the things, of course, looking back now, I'm like, damn it, they propagandized me. When 9/11 happened, every single 15-minute whatever, when they come back from commercial, Fox would show the plane. I don't know if you remember, the Fox would show the planes hitting the World Trade Centers. Mm-hmm. And then they would go back. Then they now your local news, or like every single time on Fox News, that's what you saw every time after a commercial break. So that that it's just in your head, right? And then the clip, I'll never forget it. The clip after that is a group of Green Berets coming out of AC-150 and going in and whatever, and like those images were splashed together. And you were watching that over and over again. So obviously you're 18 years old. I was from New York, and, it affected decisions that I made, because so like having a 24/7 news cycle, it's like even beyond, the initial goal of the news is to inform you, right? So, okay, now I'm informed. But now that I'm informed, okay, 9/11 happened. We know what happened. Why do I have to see over and over? Because now I hate these people. Now I'm like, okay, people are gonna have to die for this, because it's like it's happening over and over again. And then the pictures of militarism, the glorification of militarism, after seeing that, I mean, you can't tell me that doesn't affect the person's mind and their makeup and how they feel about people on the other side.
Yeah, it's effectively brainwashing. And there have been studies done around what repetition of extreme events in particular do to people. The CIA have used that technique in their covert brainwashing and torture operations, right? So we know about them doing stuff like that. Having a news station blast that into your screen regularly, it's not good. There are other problems that I have with the 24-hour news cycle, though, aside from just brainwashing and programming people. I think it creates a need to fill time. So reporters end up amping up things or infusing that 24-hour cycle with things that help fill the 24-hour gap. And so it basically makes them, in a way, kind of not fabricate news, but really exaggerate it and make it over the top so that it fits within the 24-hour cycle. because even in this modern day and age, it's a little difficult to fill a 24-hour segment with original news.
Well,
And
you got, that's so true. And then when you factor in the fact that these companies are all competing with each other, so then, you know, if it was just one state-run news company, they'd still have to struggle to keep our attention for 24 hours. But then when you combine the fact that there are multiple state-run news companies that have to compete with each other because capitalism, right? Then now I have to be, if you say something crazy and I see that your stats spiked, I got to say something crazy on the other side. So now we're competing with how rambunctious and crazy we can be. And I think both sides have figured out, if we demonize this other side, it's gonna garner, the more offensive and demonic we can be, it's gonna stoke loyalty and viewership. And then there's no even, I believe that all of us actually, I wanted to throw this out to you. I've made the statement on other videos, but I think all of us are probably collectively traumatized by, so you've got news, and then under news, you have this new phenomena of citizen journalism, right? Where you can see Philando Castile dying and dead. You can see Eric Garner dying and dead. Now, as a black person, I'm seeing this stuff. And then you can watch it, and you can rewatch it, and then you can rewatch it. And then underneath, you can see people saying, good for him, right? One less nigger on the street, da-da-da-da-da. And and well, it happens in a bunch of communities. Same thing. You can find hate crimes, LGBT people, and you can watch it happening. And then you can watch people say hateful comments underneath it. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, I've told black people, I'm like, look, if there's a shooting or something like that, do not watch the video. We know already. We get it. Don't watch the video and perpetually traumatize yourself. And then read these comments of these people celebrating the fact that somebody who looks like you got killed. And now you're all angry, and now you want to go outside and hurt somebody. Like, so my strategy has been, I hear about a shooting or something like that, I won't even watch the video anymore. I'm just not doing it. Because it's not natural.
Yeah, we didn't develop in an environment where people were just dying constantly left and right, particularly because of other human beings maliciously murdering them. Now, that's happened at points in time throughout our history, but it wasn't something that we were just bombarded with left and right all the time.
Right.
It was concentrated to certain events. And we also know that those specific events created generations of trauma. We know that now because that's been studied a lot. So, for instance, we know that the survivors of the Holocaust had carried on with them genetic trauma that was passed on to their children. And that's something that was studied extensively. My sister actually used some of those studies in her own research. And when I learned about that stuff from her, I wasn't really surprised, but it was a little shocking to see the depth to which trauma affects human beings and animals in general, actually. Even animals carry trauma with them and pass it on to their offspring.
Whoa. Well, yeah, that has amazing ramifications when you think about people saying, slavery happened, whatever, just get over it. Well, when you consider the epigenetic factor, and then the fact that, you know, socially, it's not like we went from slavery to LeBron James making millions of dollars, right? Like, that's crazy. So he's saying no. So as soon as he said no, so I was going back and forth between looking at the lyrics and looking at the video images. But as soon as he says no escape, stuck inside, that's what hit me, was like this, we're on this constant loop of horrible imagery.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to read a book on
bombarding you from all sides.
Yeah, I had to read this book about killing. It's called On Killing. They make you read it after you know, whatever. And one of the things that they were talking about was how every society has some sort of ritual to handle death. And so whatever ceremony that we come up with. Doesn't matter where on the globe you come up with it, or where on the flat earth you come up with it. Human beings create this sort of sacred moment around death so that we can basically tell ourselves this is a sacred thing, and that your life isn't meaningless, and so you lived a life, and this is a close to your story, and we have to, putting you in the ground is a way, it's more for the living than from the dead. And so he brought that up because he was talking about how soldiers, that there was this group in World War II, they basically got cut off from their, and so they had to fight their way, and they basically had to leave behind some of their, compatriots who died, and they were dead. They didn't leave behind the wounded, but they left behind their dead. And of course, the trauma of that event was exacerbated because they were not able to put that little bow on the death of their friends.
Yeah, it's like an open wound.
Yeah, so he was talking about the importance of burial and ritual. And even if you're a secularist, you still have a ritual when you say goodbye to your dead friends, family, whatever. But he was talking about how difficult that was for them because they weren't able to have that ritual. And so now, you still have rituals. You put the boots and I'm sure you've seen the picture with the boots and then the M16 and then the weapon on top of it.
Yep.
And then they do the roll call, and then they call the name of the person who's dead, and they call them 3 times, etc. It's a beautiful ritual, actually. But they weren't able to do that. And so what he was talking about was the unceremonious just killing of people without any sort of way to tie it. And so, like, when you're watching all of this death, you're watching them in the moment of their death.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just being dumped like trash, basically. And so all of us are like really collectively traumatized, and there's no escape between Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and now YouTube and cell phone. You got cell phone videos, and I mean, good Lord.
Yeah. Well, I've never looked this up myself, but I don't know. Do you know the story about the parlor? Like what a parlor is in a house?
No.
So this is something I heard quite a long time ago. I don't remember exactly when, probably a decade or more ago. I haven't looked it up myself to confirm it, but this is something I heard, is that houses, in America at least, used to be built with a parlor. Nowadays we have the living room. Now that relates for a reason I'll tell you in a bit. But the parlor was a place in the room where when a family member died, you could set them up in their, at peace, with a casket, and family members can come over to the house and see their family member there, and you keep them in the parlor for a while before you interred them underground. And so that was something that was common apparently prior to our later industrialization, when we had medicine, more regularly available, doctors everywhere, et cetera. After about like 19-teens to 1920s, they weren't as necessary anymore because people weren't dying as regularly. And so that became the living room after a while, but it used to be the parlor.
Yeah. Whoa.
And that was where you honored your dead. They would be there lying in peace for a few days before you put them underground.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was an important thing. And back then, death was so common. And people had larger families oftentimes and would lose many family members throughout that span. One of the most deep moments in my life was when I first got into doing amateur photography, and I got a DSLR back in 2008 or 2009. And I went to a cemetery in Oakland where I lived at the time, and I was going through and taking pictures. And one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of the stones from before the 1920s really had numerous people on them, and all close together in years, oftentimes children, dying within a few years of their birth. And I have photographs of them. I could show them to you one day. I've got them online. But just seeing how many people a single family could lose in a short span of time was kind of a deep thing to experience.
Yeah.
And then learn about the parlor, which I think I learned after that. So it must have been within the last 10 years, I think. And I learned about the parlor and how just important it was to sort of embrace that moment of respecting your lost loved one.
Yeah.
And death wasn't really a fearful thing because everybody lived with it. It wasn't that big of a deal, but people got to close that door and sort of let that wound heal. They lost someone, and so they get to spend some time with them and have the rest of the family members come into town and see that family member in the parlor. And so it was a healing process. And I think that's an important aspect of when you lose someone, having the ability to lay their body to rest and have a little bit of a ritual around it.
Yeah, it's you have to. It doesn't matter how you explain it, whether theologically or psychologically. It's got to be done. But that's now what's happening is that it's just like, just give me the husk, which is, this is gonna. We'll put Philando Castile up here. We'll Eric Garner. And here's the other thing that happens, because this song, it has a very pessimistic view of humanity. Humanity, you sicken me, disintegrating all around me. I lie awake and think about how this world turned on itself. So it's got a very negative view of humanity.
Or it's
I know you think you know where I'm going with this.
All right.
But what happens, here's another thing that happens in the media. Because negativity, for whatever reason, is more attractive than positivity, you could watch the news and think, human beings only do terrible things.
Mm-hmm.
You could watch a show on, World War II or something and never hear about the German fighter pilot who taxied the American fighter pilot to safety.
Mm-hmm.
Or the guy who jumps on the grenade for his buddies. Like that's not hitting. Or like the 13-year-old who stops playing with his friends to help an old lady across the street. Like the news is not showing that, or this actually happened to me. I used to live in Florida, and we were in the sticks. Like we were in the sticks, and we had this white family with giant Confederate flag in the window, and they never said a word to us ever. Like I'd ride my bike by their house, I'd say, "What's up?" They wouldn't even acknowledge my presence, right?
Mm-hmm.
My mom gets stuck in a ditch, and sure enough, the Confederate flag waving rednecks went over, hooked us up, didn't say a word to us, hooked us up, pulled my mom out of the ditch. My mom reaches in her pocketbook to give them money. They said, "No, ma'am, you should be on your way now." And that was it. We never spoke to them ever again.
Wow.
Okay, so like, depending on what news outlet you're looking at, they would probably say, "Look at this poor black family, a Confederate flag," but they're not going to show you that. You see what I'm saying? It's like people are not all one thing, right? And so I'm going to say, okay, you got, we're sinners, but we're also in the image of God. And in that moment, they were reflecting God to me, right? Like okay, we're going to help you guys. And they didn't do it perfectly or whatever, but they helped us. We were in a bad situation. Those things don't make the news. No. So your understanding of human beings and humanity and society is also, I think, it can get skewed if all you're doing is watching the news. It'll make you think that there are no decent human beings left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you ever see Bowling for Columbine?
The Michael
Moore film?
Michael Moore. No, I never saw that one.
He actually touches on that exact issue, because one of the things that he does in that film, in that documentary, is he wants to understand why it is that Canada doesn't have these issues with mass shootings and gun violence, even though they've got guns. Why does America have it? And as he's going through the documentary, at one point he says that he realized something when he was sitting inside, I think it was a bar or something, or a coffee shop that had a television in it and was showing the news. And he realized something different about Canada, is that the news isn't all entirely negative, scary stuff, right? They're not just filling you with fear the whole time. And he did a comparison and he showed the difference between normal everyday American news and normal everyday Canadian news, and
Whoa.
that was the difference that he found, is that Canadian news was talking about things like, oh, such and such Girl Scout team has done this and built this cool thing or something. Things that are lighthearted and talking about the good that people have done. And then in America, it's all terror, fear, war.
Well, yeah. Well,
he showed how he could walk in. There's one moment in that film where he's walking up and opening people's front doors in Canada because they don't keep their doors locked.
Wow.
Just kind of showing the cultural difference there.
Yeah. I think it's so funny. I was listening to the story. I was in a conversation with somebody, and I was like, yeah, I mean, Trump, he's done terrible things. At the same time, I was like, the guy, there was this guy one time, and Trump had broke down on the side of the street, and this guy stopped, didn't know who he was. I mean, he wasn't out of his car, of course. When he showed up, he's like, shit, you're Donald Trump. What can I do for you? And Trump was like, my car. Anyway, the guy fixes Trump's car. Trump pays off the rest of their mortgage.
Wow.
And so I was like, there's the image of God in him. Great. And the other person's like, yeah, that's like a quarter for him. It's like, I know it's a quarter for him, but it wasn't a quarter for the people whose mortgage he paid off.
He didn't have to do that.
But it's like, we can't see the good in people we disagree. We can't. And I think that's actually dangerous. If you want to completely demonize everybody you disagree with, then your outlook on the world is going to be very, very, very drab, right? So even though when I see somebody doing something bad, I go, well, yeah, I mean, original sin. But I always look for, where's the image of God in that person?
Mm-hmm.
And I, at least for me, I don't think there's anybody, I don't care who it is, Hitler. I think you can find good in everybody if you look long enough. And sometimes, I agree, there are people, Hitler being an example, where sometimes they're so evil that it just drowns out the good parts of them, the image of God parts of them. But I think that those are exceptional cases and once in a generation cases. I think in most cases, when we're dealing with people and we're looking at the world, we can find, and the biggest thing for me was Muslims, right? Like 9/11 happened. I'm like, the entire day, it was so weird. I just kept saying, okay. I was so angry, I couldn't even talk. And like I said, it influenced decisions that I made. And I just remember, it was just like as clear as day to me in my mind. I'm like, these people have to die. They have to die for this shit. Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of interfacing with Muslim people as human beings and of course I would attribute this supernaturally as well, to where I began to love them, and I began to shift as an ally and say, hey, how many of these people do you actually know? You're talking about wiping out millions of people. Ted Cruz, we're going to make sand glow, we're going to carpet bomb these people, which is a war crime, by the way, pro-life Christians. Mm-hmm. I always love how people who've never done any killing love to talk about sending other people to do killing.
Yeah. Or where they kind of have this fantasy in their head about being a hero.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm going to have my gun ready, and as soon as something goes down, I'm going to be killing some bad guys.
Yeah. And it's always like, okay, you're the dude you're going to be the one hiding behind the Humvee and then saying, I jammed, I'm ready. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. A big part of it, I think, comes down to, we've got this, a lot of it is the media. I blame the media for a lot of the way that we're treating each other. But, if you're constantly seeing only an enemy, and you can't see any of the good in them, or any of the gray, or anything that doesn't make them an enemy of yours, and all you see is an enemy, then all you really get to see is a world full of monsters.
Right.
And
Right.
there's a lot around that. Obviously, some of it has to do with people themselves. It's not all the media's fault. The media is, though, a big, well-oiled machine with a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of research. They devoted a lot of money into learning how to figure out what pushes people's buttons enough to get them glued to the television or whatever it is they're looking at, and to get them to focus on your channel, your outlet. And they're experts at it now. They know how to manipulate people very, very well. Probably one of the healthiest things people can do is disconnect from the media.
Well, the craziest thing is now is that you've got these, again, citizen journalists, like, for example, Jimmy Dore. I watch Jimmy Dore religiously.
Yeah, me too.
The reason is usually to the left of pretty much everything I believe in, except for he was actually the one that converted me to Medicare for All. Although it wasn't really that difficult of a conversion, because I'm like, I've never, it's so strange that there's certain, okay, so the first time I learned about the Holocaust, my mom had to sit me across the table and explain to me what happened. And she knew what type of kid I was, and she knew what it would do to me. So she had to say, look, because I saw there was a commercial, and there was like an Anne Frank little thing, and I'm like, why are they focusing so much on this girl? And then she said, well, so she sat me down, and I must have cried for, I don't think I've ever really gotten over that situation.
Yeah.
And then the first time I heard and saw a description of what a DNC abortion was, and then this Sean, I keep forgetting the guy's name, but it's the meme I posted about the guy who died at 26.
Oh yeah.
Like literally, it's equivalent to me. Like, as far as effect on me and me saying something has to be done. Those three events they're all literally the same to me. And for those you don't know, he's a 26-year-old. He aged out of his mother's insurance or something like that. So he started having to ration his insulin. In a month, he's dead.
Yeah.
26 years old. So my point is that, so I'm watching that, and I'm watching Jimmy, because I was like, Medicare for All. And Jimmy Dore is, he's because he pounds the pavement on that topic.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Dore with Medicare for All is the equivalent to me with abortion. Like it's like it comes up out of nowhere for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
But you can, and the thing about Jimmy Dore, I don't know if you've caught this. He's a really emotional dude.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is not like games for him. He's not doing it to get views. Like, he believes in this, like, with his whole soul, and I love him for that. But my point is, I am more likely, and you can look because CNBC and all these people, they all have YouTube channels, and some of these citizen journalists are getting more views now than the regular journalists, and in one sense, it's a good thing, but in another sense, that can be extremely destructive, because now you've got people who are making statements of fact that don't necessarily have the research apparatus that a CNBC or whatever would. And the fact checking, like Dan Rather, I don't know if you remember, Dan Rather got embarrassed. Remember, he said all that craziness about Bush or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the end of it. But there's no accountability for making up BS stuff now in the citizen journalist context. So there's nothing stopped. So if Jimmy Dore wanted to be an evil genius and start spouting out all this disinformation, he could really do a lot of damage. And so that's why the whole "We Are the Media" slogan for Middle America came about, was because I was like, whoa, wait a second here. Like, all of us are collectively now the media, because we have the ability to put information out into the ether and contextualize stuff in such a way as to, the funniest thing, I did the Candace Owens thing where supposedly Candace Owens was pro-Hitler. And then right after that, I did the Ilhan Omar thing, who supposedly hates America. I did those back to back. where
Who
people
supposedly hated Jews.
right. She supposedly hates Jews. She hates America. And then Candace Owens supposedly loves Hitler. Like I did both of those videos back to back, and the commentary is crazy.
Yep.
Like Candace Owens, they were like, "You nasty right winger, you blah blah blah, da 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 da," and then with the Ilhan, "You Muslim." It's like, okay, all right.
Yeah, I've had to talk with, well, not had to, but there are many members of the village that I engage with regularly, and we talk about a lot of different subjects. And there are some who very much have this this view that just because someone said, seems to be aligned with some ideas that they disagree with, that they're somehow then they can't be redeemed and they're evil
Right.
or whatever, right? They're the enemy.
Right.
And it's kind of crazy, some of the things that I hear that sometimes, usually in our Discord, server that we have for the village, at least in that community, things seem a little more reasonable. Like people will talk to each other and hash stuff out. They may disagree fervently with each other at some point, but then they'll get in on a voice chat and they'll talk to each other and kind of hash it out. And it ends up working in the end. Actually, Dan and I, Australian Dan, got into it at one point, and he's like, "Hey, why don't we just do a voice chat and talk about this? I don't think text is working." So I jumped on. It was late too. It was like 3 a.m. or something. I was tired.
I had the same thing with Dan. It was freaking 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but it turned out to be a really good idea because I had the wrong opinion. Even I jumped on him, then jumped on this one thing that he was saying. I saw it incorrectly, and we hashed it out over the next hour. And in the end, we both agreed with each other.
Yeah, our usage of media is either going to destroy us or save us, right? So that's an example of using media in such a way as in a redemptive way, right?
Yeah.
There are. There's a Pandora. It's like the gods came down and showed us fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah. And we were like, fire. Let's see
let's see what happens when we throw it into this forest. It's like save your life in the Arctic, or it could be a pretty horrible way to die in a forest.
That's a good analogy.
And that's what's happened. And obviously, as a Christian and as a post-millennialist, I believe that we're gonna figure it out and use it properly. But whew.
Hope so.
Go ahead.
I hope so. I think that most important thing, the lesson that a lot of people have to learn, like for me, I mean, know me, you've heard me talk about things. I'm pretty informed. I stay up to date with everything that's going on. So I'm generally very well informed on modern events and politics, but I can't focus on it all the time. That's just too taxing. So I take big breaks, and make sure that I get out and I go into my garden and do my gardening or work with my bees or something. Go out up into the mountains here. Just detach from all the noise and the barrage and bombardment of negativity, and realize that there's something much more than what you see in the news out there. The news is giving you this concentrated, focused look at everything in a negative light. And as soon as you disconnect from that and cast your gaze elsewhere, you're going to see that the world is very different from what the news is telling you.
That's right. And the last thing I'll say about it is, if you're determined to see human evil, and if you're determined to look for things that will make you afraid, you will find it. And if you are determined to see human goodness, and if you are determined to see things that will increase your love for humanity, you'll find that too.
I agree.
All depends on where you look, what you look at, and how long you look at it. That's the difference.
Yeah.
What do you give this song? This is a 2-minute song, right?
Short.
Which sparked, in my opinion, a very important 30 to 45 minute discussion.
How long have we been talking for?
Probably longer than 45 minutes, actually.
About 50 minutes, looks like.
Yeah. So what do you got?
I got to give this one a 10. This is such a good song. It's just, let me tell you a little bit about why I give it a 10.
Okay.
It's not just the lyrics. I mean, the lyrics are pretty simple, right? It's basically feelings about the way he sees the world right now. But Scott Vogel's vocals, his last name is Vogel, kind of rhymes, but his vocals on that are intense. And there are moments in there in that song where he just kind of goes off and you feel it.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm a pretty level person all in all. I don't really have a lot of, ups and downs to my emotions. But when I hear that song, it boosts my energy a bit, especially with his vocals. It's like there's so much rawness and feeling in it. And it just, it hits you hard when you listen to it. So the first time I heard that song, I listened to it a bunch of times. I was like, this song is amazing. That's what I used to do when I was a kid, like play it over and over again.
Well, that's what I do, especially if it's in the shower. Forget it.
Yeah.
Shower metal. Yeah, I hear you. This song's a 9.3 for me because I wish it would have been a little bit longer. Although I'm going to say a statement, it might be completely ignorant. Isn't hardcore music, like especially certain brands of hardcore, like very short to the point? Let's go to the next song type of thing.
It's known for its directness.
Okay.
Very short, very direct, not a lot of flair.
Yeah. Right to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Z.
Yeah.
We had a really good talk. Look, some of you might be saying, well, shoot, I'm not going to be able to carry a conversation like Z. Nobody can. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's fun. We have Tina comes on. She brings her own flavor. Tina has a ton of a wealth of experience in the actual scene itself. So that's what Tina brings to the table. Z, like I said, she's a village oracle, right? And if you come on, you're going to have your thing. It's all good. Just don't be intimidated by Z because nobody's going to be expecting that from you.
Come one, come all.
That's right. Just don't kill me. All right. Vin out.
Z out.
Gone.